I'm no good at taking good advice, and I'm self-careless, so don't tell me twice that lately I've been so stuck in my head that I forget just about everything my therapist said. Maybe I'm self-helpless. Maybe I'm self-helpless. Maybe I'm self-helpless. Maybe we are all self-helpless.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Self-Helpless podcast. I'm Delanie Fischer, and today I'm chatting with Shelby McGuire Canlas, who is a board-certified coach. Her background is in HR, and she helps people find jobs they enjoy and excel at those jobs. And my goodness, she is just a wealth of knowledge. I actually met Shelby because my husband Cam took me out for my birthday, and he surprised me with tickets to this like outdoor tea experience, and there was also a live improv show based on that show Bridgerton. Anyway, it was such a blast, and we ended up sitting next to Shelby and a friend of hers and connected that way. So as we started chatting, I found out about the work that she does and knew she would be an incredible guest for the podcast to support all of us. So today we are talking about how to find jobs that are actually available, how to help you determine what kind of work you may find meaningful to you or that might be a really great fit for your personality. So many amazing tips and hacks for applications, resumes, cover letters, the interview process, the follow-up. Shelby also debunked some common myths around the entire job search process as well. That was really interesting. So I highly recommend taking notes during this episode so you can jot down the action steps that feel like the right next move for you specifically. I just wish I knew all of these things so much earlier on in life. It would have been very helpful. So this was just excellent guidance. And we're not only covering the tactics and strategy, but we also talk about taking care of your mental health and your well-being, because that depression that can creep in when you are applying and nothing seems to be working, that can really mess with you, and you are not alone in that. So we dig into that too, because I mean, that is the most important part of all of this, really. I also share some experiences of mine, both around applying for different jobs and being on the other end of hiring for different positions as well. So whether you're looking for just a job, any job, or maybe your first job, or you're considering a pivot into a different industry or title, maybe something that fits with a lifestyle that you like to have, or you simply just want to learn about other careers that are out there to keep your options open as you gain more work experience, this episode will help you get clear on what you can do next in order to set yourself up for the kind of success that you would like to have. And I just want to say, finding work is not a one size fits all solution. There are so many things to consider during this process, and there are so many different approaches that you can take. But Shelby gives really great advice on how tending to some of these best practices are really going to skyrocket your opportunities. So here we go. I'd love to touch on kind of like how your values can help kind of be a compass on even what do you want to apply for? You know, what jobs do you want to look for?
COVID really gave people the chance to rethink what matters to them.
Yeah.
And so part of, one of the most frequent things I get is like, find a job that matters, because I'm realizing I'm spending so much time there, even if we're working from home, which could be even worse sometimes, the time you spend. But they're realizing like that doesn't really jive with what I want and
Yeah.
what I think long term would mean something to me. And so that's a big one.
Yes. I'll definitely share my personal experience with the job search, whether it's building businesses and pivoting or applying to places and trying to get promoted and all of that. So let's start with maybe values of how can people start to narrow down what jobs they want to seek out. And also, you know, the people that are like, I just need money. I just need a job, right? Like it can also be a privilege to take your time to find work. And so maybe you can just share a little bit about both of those situations.
fully 100% agree with that. And I'm happy you acknowledged it. I'd actually written a note that said disclaimer because I wanted to say to anybody who's listening, like, I know that a lot of what I say will sound oversimplified and they'll be like, sure, you make it sound so easy, but, and I get it. So I just would encourage people to sort of take the spirit of what I say and do with it what they can, right? Just do their best. As far as finding a job, yeah, sometimes you just have to find a job, and I like to think of that as your next job, not your last job.
Yeah, oh,
Right.
that's great. Yes. Yeah, something
And
for the time being.
yeah, exactly, but make it worthwhile. Like, figure out, with this or with any job, like, figure out what you want to get out of it so that time matters, right? So even if you're like, well, I really want to get a job at a hospital, nobody's hiring, so I'm going to be a barista for now. Like, great, be the best one, learn the most you can about customer service, like, learn how to be effective in a really high paced environment, like, get what you can from that, and then keep looking. Right, just keep looking. And so don't feel like you're compromising, and if you can make some meaning out of it, then you won't feel like you're going backwards, you won't feel like a failure. You will just acknowledge it as the next step, right, as that thing we're
Yeah.
building on.
Oh,
And so,
absolutely.
yeah. Now, you'd mentioned values, and I didn't even talk about those yet. So,
Yeah.
but you're right. It can be like a compass. I like to think of it as a filter. Like, if you can identify what your values are, whether that's like, I want to be home with my family more, or I want to have time to volunteer. Um, I want a company that's in alignment with my beliefs. Like, all of those are valid and all of those matter. Write them down. Figure out which ones are must-haves, which ones you can be flexible on, um, and then look for companies around that.
Yeah.
Use surveys, use best places to work, use the B Corp directory. Don't be limited by just what's posted as having open positions.
Yeah.
Go be proactive and look for those companies. Look at the products you use. Look at those companies. It can be both a filter and a like jumping off point for your creativity as far as identifying where you want to look.
I love this. I love that you said just look at it as your next job and not your last job, because we can put so much emphasis on, like, if I apply here or if I take this job, what does this mean about me? Maybe it's not something flashy or something that you even want to tell people that you do or whatever. And I've definitely been in that situation where I just need something. I'm applying to a grocery store, whatever. And it's those jobs that gave me such a great foundation for my creativity and for making things happen that were closer to whatever that dream job I had in mind at that time was. And so I know that I've talked to a lot of people about how when they feel like they have to find work that maybe isn't creative or whatever it is, they feel so defeated. And I'm like, no, this is like such a great tool for your creativity. When you know where your next paycheck is coming from, I feel like it frees up this mental space for you to create. My recent values that I use to find my current job that is outside of my business, I really wanted to work from home if possible. I love working from home. I really wanted to do something with in the vegan space, whether that was with a vegan brand or a nonprofit or whatever. And that's kind of the only guidelines I had. Just like, can I find something remote and can I find that? And that was enough to help me narrow things down, because it can be so overwhelming, especially with remote work, right? That it's like, wait, I could potentially work for most companies anywhere. Like, that's kind of too much for somebody's brain sometimes. We have a lot of people who tune into this podcast that have so many interests that it overwhelms them. So they might be thinking, oh, I like music, but I also like finance, but I also, and they're like, I could work for any of these industries. So which one do I go for? Could you share any examples that you might have from your own experience or with clients where what helped them narrow things down to even figure out what their very next step would be if somebody's really having trouble with it?
I would say just start going down one of the roads. Like, just
Right.
pick one. I don't care if
Yeah.
you pick it out of a hat. I don't care if it's based on your mood that day. Just pick one,
I love
right?
it. Yes.
Because
Yes.
there's nothing legally binding about you picking a direction to pursue, right? You can always be like, yeah, tried it, not working out, but I have these other interests, thank goodness. Or you'll find, oh, I really love doing that, so I don't want to do it as a job. I'd love to keep it a
Yeah.
hobby. But you don't know unless you take that first step. So just pick. And then start talking to people, right? If you're in actual job search mode, you might need to be like a little more aggressive, in that you might want to, yeah, start talking to people with a specific role in mind. You might want to actually start applying to see what the interviews are like, do those things. But if you're in that exploration phase where you are currently working, there's no real rush, just a general desire, then yeah, start looking at people on LinkedIn who have titles in that industry and see what it says they do, right? Start
Mm-hmm.
just reaching out to people and seeing who you can start conversations with to get a real day in the life. And then step back and say, what still sounds interesting to me? Now that I've sort of done some of this, what has floated to the top? What remains sort of that thread I want to continue to pull on, and then just keep moving forward. Just do the next thing and the next thing.
I love that you said this. It's just pick something, right? Because I think we can get stuck in over analyzing rumination mode of like, it's got to
Right.
be the perfect next step. And it really doesn't. You could just try
Yeah.
something and then it's okay to change your mind. And I love that you said like utilize other people. This is one of my favorite things that I do in my life is if I'm curious about a topic or a job or some kind of creative project, I will ask if I could get a consultation with somebody. And it's either, something that I pay for or something that they're very gracious to give me, for free, where it's just kind of like a networking chat where you can ask questions and all of that stuff. Another hot tip, if you want to connect with people, you can start a podcast. And, and interview people that you're interested in what they do. And now you've talked to them for, 30 minutes to an hour. But I love this because I think that connection can really crack a lot of codes for people.
Right. I love the idea of that because it goes along with like, if you have a job and you ask to talk to somebody about what they're doing, there are low stakes for them. You're not asking them for anything except to talk about themselves. They're going to do it. Same with a podcast. If you're like, hey, I want to have you on my podcast, low stakes for them. You're not asking them for a job. So they're more inclined to do it. Yes. So think about that. Like if you, if you don't want to start a podcast, at least start a conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
But,
exactly.
But having that sort of, that idea that I'm not asking them for anything except like maybe their time and their thought expertise, around their, whatever it is. Most people, it's when you go in asking them straight for a job, that's when people like ignore you, shy away. So just keep that in mind.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. You just touched on something so important, I think, for any kind of outreach, whether you're, looking for a job or you're applying to something else, right? Maybe you're applying to be on somebody's podcast or you're whatever it is. You're outreaching to an ideal client or something. It's like, how can you lead with a gift? It doesn't have to be a physical gift or something tangible or whatever, but asking like, I am willing to pay for your time. Would you be willing to meet with me for 30 minutes? Or I am so fascinated by what you do. Can I interview you? You're giving something valuable. You're giving them a chance to share their experience. You're potentially paying them, for their time. I just think that creates this openness, like you said. They're not like restricted, like, what does this person want from me? The guards are not there. The guards come down, and then you might get even more from the interaction than you ever thought possible. I think you were touching on how people can kind of internally kind of align with their next steps. Why don't we talk about when it comes to actually searching for jobs that are available? Any tips that you have for, there's tons of platforms out there, right? Like the Indeeds and ZipRecruiters of the world, but there's also, like brands' websites, where you can directly apply. Anything that you want to share about that process?
Okay, just cut me off when you need to.
Like we have 10 hours.
There's a ton here. First of all, to your point, I would recommend going to the actual website, the brand website, as much as possible. So use LinkedIn, use Indeed, use ZipRecruiter to find the positions, but then just go to the website and apply directly. Perfect. That way we know. Like Indeed's should take you to the original site anyway. LinkedIn, a lot of people get trapped in that sort of quick apply thing because they're applying for so many positions. It's so tempting, but I really want you in the company's database. And so the best way to make sure that's there is to go directly to it, and also to see if the position's still posted. Because quite honestly, right, things get stale and sometimes they just don't get taken down and that kind of thing. So
that's what I heard. That's what I heard is like a lot of people forget to take positions down. So it looks like there's a lot more jobs available than there actually are, which can be so frustrating for applicants who are like, why doesn't anybody want to interview me? But it's actually not you. There's so much going on those platforms.
It gives me peace of mind to know people are applying directly on the site.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
Yeah. Do everything you can to research. Be super creative. Sometimes there's like hospitality specific websites. There's creative specific websites. Like, do a little digging and find out what those are. They shouldn't be the sole site you apply on though. Like, I think what I want people to like take away is that when you're job searching, you have to do like all the things. It's no one thing. It's not your resume. It's not just your interview. It's not just where you look for the job. It's all the things that get you that next job. So be mindful of that. And once you get caught up on the postings, like, give yourself a week to catch up, to find the sites, catch up on the sites. And then you'll only have to look like 1 or 2 days a week at the sites because you'll see what's new, what's popped up since last you looked. Yeah. So that should minimize your time. When I say do all the things, that means applying, following up, networking, and proactively reaching out, right? Mm-hmm. Because that way you're going to hit the jobs that are open, the job, you'll get in with the jobs that maybe aren't open yet, or you'll get the recommendations to people. They're like, hey, my buddy's at that company and I can make an introduction for you. We need to be doing sort of all the things in our job search.
Yeah.
With that, my recommendation also is that you don't get stuck on any one thing. So like pick one thing a day to work on, pick one day a week to just do applications, pick another day just to do follow-up, another day to do networking, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's one, to build momentum. The other is because you walk away feeling like you accomplished something. All this is sort of predicated on the belief that you have a job target. So I also don't believe that you should apply for everything. I think you should apply for those things that really matter and invest your time and energy in that. Yes. In order to, again, build that momentum.
Right.
It's definitely, if you like apply for everything, you'll get nothing kind of thing.
I love that. That's so important because I think people try to go wide instead of deep, where it's like, I'm just going to kind of like copy and paste this to as many different openings that I see versus here are the 3 that are speaking to me the most. How can I go above and beyond for each of these? It might take the same amount of time and energy, but I think you're going to have better chances when you're really personalizing some of that stuff for the jobs that you actually want versus let me apply to a million things. Absolutely. And there's only 3 I really wanted, but they didn't get the time and attention they deserve.
There's some real technical reasons for that. Yeah. You are always applying online now, which means it has to go through the applicant tracking system, which means your resume has to like hit their algorithm just right. So if you're applying to everything, it's highly unlikely that you're customizing, you're making those little tweaks necessary to get your resume seen.
Yes.
And so that's the other reason. And then also you need to put out a consistent brand. And so that means like part of networking and part of following up is just being a presence on LinkedIn of, replying to other people's stories, sharing out your own thoughts and articles, and being so that when that company looks you up online, which they will, they see that this person really does fit with what they say they're doing on their cover letter or resume.
I like that companies are now offering basically email lists. Like you can join their email list to find out about new job opportunities. I think that's really great and convenient as well, where it's like, I really want to work for this company, but they don't have any open positions or they don't have any positions that really make sense for me. But I'm going to go ahead and just, put my name in and I'll be able to, get a little message about when something's available. I think that's really great. I can share kind of from the other point of this where as somebody who has hired several people for my business, I can tell you exactly what's worked for for me and for them for getting the job. So I actually would post on Indeed or ZipRecruiter, but it was so overwhelming because within 24 hours, I'd probably have over 300 applicants and so many more than qualified for the position. But because I only need, one person, I would pretty much take, the first maybe 5 to 10 people that felt like a good fit or whatever. And then I would close down the opening because I would just get bombarded with so many resumes. But the people that actually got the job, they sent a personal message as well to my email. Like if they looked me up, they were able to find me. They sent a message about, why they think they would be a great fit, not only for the job, but based on my values. I share my values on my brand, my branding and stuff like that. And it gave me a chance to actually go find their resume and pull it from, the 300 plus applications, which I did. So the people that just took a little bit of extra time and said, I really want this and here's why. I mean, we're talking about like a 3 to 5 sentence email, at least a little blurb. Personal, doesn't have to be like super formal, very conversational. And it allowed me to say, okay, I picked some people based on a resume, but I'm going to go ahead and pick people who actually also reached out on top of it. And that was kind of the pool that I used to, get the interviews and all of that. So I don't know, that worked for me a lot.
And that is what I refer to as follow-up. Like that is exactly what I ask my people to do. Like if you can't find somebody in the company that's maybe in alignment with that role, find a recruiter. And your people had the benefit of you being a small business, right? So you were the person.
Right.
As opposed to like these large, if they're applying to one of the larger like tech companies, it's all, the online system. And so if you were to reach out to a recruiter or a person in the company with that 3 to 5, like I say, it's an opening, a hook, and a close is my, right? Like here's saying I actually applied, I like followed the rules, here's the position I applied for. So mentally they can already place you. And then the hook is like, here's what makes me legitimate. Like I really do have the experience. And then the close is just let me know. Like if there's anything else you need, just let me know. And especially with large companies, send it to multiple people. You have zero to lose. Right?
Oh, I love that. Yes.
And there's ways to find people. Like you can message them on LinkedIn, or you can send a connection request with a message. If you pay for it, you can actually send a message. Or you can go to like one of the sites like hunter.io and find their email address and send them a note. And so there's a lot of things you can do to be seen. And in all of those interactions, like if you send out, when you're job searching, you should have a standardized bottom signature on the bottom of your email that has your LinkedIn hyperlink so they can easily, like, it's so easy to just click.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so we want them to see, but I'm so glad to hear that is how you did it. Yeah. We just need real eyes to see us, right? It's a real set of eyes.
And it's really interesting because the people who I interviewed and ended up getting the job are the ones that took that extra time, because I think they're also thinking, they're probably taking the time, extra time on the jobs that they actually want versus just that, let me just apply to everything. And that really showed up in the interview. I could feel the kind of excitement for whatever the role was. So maybe that's helpful, but it's really great to know that just a little blurb could make the difference. I would love to hear about some of the logistics of the resume stuff, right? Like all the systems these are going through, if whatever programs, AI stuff is catching, titles of things, what can people do to ensure that maybe they're getting through the next round if they're applying with thousands or hundreds of applicants?
It's definitely a vote early, vote often situation, and that we want the top of your resume to have as many of the keywords and use the language from the posting is the best way to make sure it matches.
Love it.
And so I think resume writers talk about the top third of your resume needs to be the most impactful. And so there are little things you can do. One, like have a professional summary at top. Don't just go right into your experience, because a professional summary will give you a chance to maybe use some words in your summary that are also in your experience. That's what the systems are looking for. Like, how often is it used? How high in their resume is it used? That kind of thing. And so, so we want to use that. You can also put in, under your professional summary, you can put in like your top skills. And that's what you really tweak for the position. Like if there's certain technologies they use, or research processes or something like that, like put those in there and use the exact language.
Yes.
And real quick, I would say same on your cover letter, like match the language, because we don't know who's reading that cover letter first. Right. So it has to be like, if HR intern who doesn't understand, the position reads it, they just need to be able to match language, right? And then as they pass it on, like it needs to be well written enough to show, that you actually know how to write. But yeah, so when it comes to the resume, you don't need your address. Like, gone are the days where you need your address.
Yes, that's important, right? Because that can also lead to scams, right? If people have your full address and your name and everything. So don't put your full address on your resume.
Right. And don't put references. Like, that's, again, not necessary. Don't offer that up to people. Give them just what they need.
Yeah.
And it takes up space. And anyway, they don't deserve the names of your friends just yet. So just give it to them.
I love it.
They haven't earned that.
Goes close to your heart for now.
Yeah, but put your LinkedIn up there and customize your LinkedIn URL. So it's just that extra little, like, I know what I'm doing. So I don't know. And it's really easy to do, to customize your LinkedIn URL, but put that at the top of your resume along with your phone number and email. That's kind of it. If you are in certain professions, like if you have a website or a link to a portfolio, like that needs to be in there for sure also. But just, for most people. And then, just I would say, like, take as many postings as possible and just go through and highlight all the words that are the same and let that be used to, like, how you let that focus your resume for you. Right. So, so that you're speaking the right language and telling the right story.
I love this so much. It's interesting because the experience that you have or the titles that you have or whatever, they could be worded in a lot of different ways. You might as well word it in a way that makes sense for the job that you're applying for.
Right. What you're doing might be called one thing and it's called something else at this other company you're applying for, but you know it's the same thing. So what I want you to do is put your title as it shows / their title. And then that way it gets picked up. And then when they ask, you just say, it's the same thing. I just wanted to call it what you call it. Right? Yes. It's not a big deal. Resumes aren't legally binding documents. It's your marketing tool. So it can be a little, as long as you can justify it. I don't want you to lie about anything, but as long as you can explain it or back it up, like, do what you got to do.
I love that. Those are the types of things that I did. I've been a coordinator and a manager at this company, but they're looking for an executive assistant. That's basically a lot of the stuff I did as a coordinator. What if I just put executive assistant / coordinator, hoping that it gets seen, but like, oh, this person's done exactly the job that we're applying for or whatever, right? So I love that you can actually put both and just explain it later. How do you feel about people putting the year that if they have schooling or something that they're putting on there, the year that they graduated, or just leave that off completely?
Leave it off.
Yes.
Ain't nobody's business.
And now, if you're really go back to school also.
Yeah, right. And again, nobody's business. But if you're a really recent grad, I understand, because you don't have much work experience and that sort of explains it, right? When you've only had 2 jobs, they're like, oh, well, they only graduated 4 years ago. I get it. Once you have more than that, just take it off. Once you have, a solid history to lean on. Also, once you have a solid history to lean on, move it to the bottom. That should not be at the top of your resume, because your experience is what matters. As you know, you can get a degree in whatever the hell you want and have a successful career doing something entirely different.
You mean like how I majored in religious studies and religions of the world?
My goodness gracious.
And then became a comedian? It's like, what are we doing here? What the
Yes, that is exactly right. So leave years off for things like that. The only years are the working years, and that's just because people really do want to see, like, these either work consistently, or they will ask you where there's, a chunk missing. Be prepared to answer for that. But absolutely leave those off.
great. No, I think that's so good. Yeah, because it's just, if people are making assumptions already, it's like they're also going to make an assumption based on like the year that you graduated. Like it's just, it's also weird.
Unfortunate, but weird. Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of tips do you have maybe for people who do have gaps in their work history? Should they put that somewhere on their resume on why there's a gap, or just wait for to address it in an interview, in a cover letter? What do you think?
Wait for it to be brought up. Like if you were doing freelance during that time, of course, absolutely put it, or if you were volunteering and the skills related, absolutely put it. You don't even have to say it's volunteer work. Just put what you were doing. If you really just weren't working, say you got laid off and it was the beginning of the pandemic, so it took you a long time to find something else. Yeah, people kind of get it. So just be straightforward about it and have an answer. Like, I will say though, if you are not working, like do something with that time so that you can say, well, I wasn't working, but I was taking these classes to prepare for this, or I was caring for my parent, which people are doing more and more now too. Be as intentional with that time as if you were working. I think it's really important, but don't make it something it wasn't. Just be prepared to have the question asked.
Do you feel like there's certain gaps that could deter somebody from even getting an interview and getting an opportunity to explain why there's a gap? But let's say that somebody, cared for their elderly parents or something for 3 years. So there's a 3-year gap between this job and this job. In something like that, where they could, because we know people can make assumptions based on a resume, something like that, would it be worth putting like a one-liner in a cover letter or something, or a message of like, the reason there's a gap is this, or just really like, if they're not giving you an interview based on a gap, maybe they're not even, maybe that's not for you then. Maybe that's just not the company for you that can kind of fill in the blanks for themselves, that like life happens, or
I think that's my overarching philosophy is you're going to get the interviews you're supposed to have. You could, especially if it's something personal, like caring for a parent or a child, I feel like, again, that's nobody's damn business unless they earn the right to get that from you. Right.
Yeah.
And fortunately though, because of, pandemic layoffs, and then there was the recent layoffs in the tech industry and stuff, I find that gaps aren't viewed as critically as they were previously. Like they're willing to ask the question if you have the right skill set and the qualifications they're looking for. I'm finding that people are getting the interviews still. It still goes back to applying for the right jobs.
Great. Oh, that's awesome to know. That's awesome to hear. Question for you about listing your location on a resume if you're applying to something that is not a remote job, but maybe it's out of state. You're willing to relocate, but what if the person on the other end is like, it's just going to be easier to only take interviews from people who already live in the area? What do we do in that situation? I've definitely been on the inside of some of those discussions, but I'd love to hear like how what your experience has been with like clients.
That's a tough one. That is really a tough one, because you're right. What you are facing is getting them to like leap over that psychological hurdle of, will they actually come? Can they get here? It helps that we don't put any kind of address on our resume anymore, but they will still see where you've been working. So they are going to make assumptions about that. If you really are genuinely going to be going there, you could just at the top of your resume, instead of your whole address, you could just put the city and state, and just to help them again make that psychological leap. You could also in your cover letter say planning to move there by, if you have that, right? That helps a lot too.
That's great.
Because of the remote culture we have now, it's not as big of a deal. People have grown. Some companies, I will say, there's certain things like with healthcare, you're always going to be on site for the most part, right? There's certain things like that, but most companies now aren't as leery. I'm just not seeing it quite as much.
Is it ever okay to use like a friend's address that lives in the area that you are planning to move to or want to live in? Can you lie?
The only place you would use that address would be on the application, right? And the reality is no one's going to actually mail you anything.
Right.
So it kind of doesn't matter, right? And I assume if you did get there and didn't have housing, you would stay with that friend, right?
Yeah. No, I like where this is going, right? Half truth.
So, I think it is a situation of just don't get yourself caught up in something that, that is an outright lie. Don't, that's not who you are. We don't want that. But if it's something that can be sort of justified or explained or really is part of the plan, just do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because again, it's only on the application. Now, the application is the only legal document, right? You sign that. Mm-hmm. But again, the address doesn't matter on that as much until you start working.
Right.
And then you better get them your right address. But yeah, people have temporary addresses all the time, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, I think this is so interesting because although this was before the pandemic happened, I worked one of my jobs. I worked at a movie studio, and was kind of instructed like, look, like it's really fast paced. It's quick turnaround. The people that are out of state usually cannot make it happen, get here quickly and find their home and all this stuff. Like when we're hiring so quickly. And so it was kind of like, hey, look for the people that are already here or that are not too far away. And so, and that always kind of bummed me out because what if that person could make it happen? So, I listened a little bit. Yeah. There's still a lot of people that I offered an interview to and all of that who were out of state and they could make it work. But sometimes like those inside conversations are happening and you don't even know that just by simply listing the city on your resume, you could be, being counted out.
Right. And I would say your manager was right too. Right. This is a situation where there is no one right answer because it is hard, especially because I assume you're talking about moving to LA. And if you're coming from Nebraska to LA.
Yeah.
That's quite a sticker shock, right? And it might take you a little while to figure out how to find a place that you can actually afford.
Yeah.
But luckily now with the video interviews and things like that, like the first interview is rarely in person. That's usually down the road a ways anyway. So it gives these people time to prepare. And so to that point though, you could also add that line. In addition to, I plan on moving by, you could say, I'm available for interviews, immediately. That would probably help also.
Oh, I love that. No, that's great because like, you're right. Most interviews are happening remotely, which is awesome. Yeah. The job that I was helping hire for was all in person. They wanted in-person interviews, but that's also good because, hey, if somebody's willing to fly out for the interview and then they're making it work with the move, like that also shows like pretty early on if you offer them an interview and they're like, oh, I can't fly out for that, or then okay, great, you tried, you offered it, and you can move on. Anything else that you want to say about resumes before we get into some cover letter tips?
Yes. Know your audience with the resume. In that, I do work with a lot of creatives, and so they need to have two resumes, one that is suitable for the online application system and one that actually reflects their personality. And so know when to use that. So if they're meeting a person or if they have a name of somebody, then send your fun resume. But when you're applying online, always use the one that the computer can read. And I know it kills some of my creatives because they are very boring, these ATS-friendly resumes. But you just got to have it. Use all the colors you want. I don't care. But we want to make sure you have a chance at being seen. So sort of know your audience. Whereas like if you're an academic or you're applying for a position in research, you might want a CV, which are even uglier, which are worse. Do not, if you have more than a few years experience of work, I would say more than 2 jobs or something, don't try to force it on one page because then you're missing out on opportunities for keywords to be found. You're missing out on getting recognition for things you've done because you're trying to truncate your experience. So that whole one-page thing, the computer doesn't care how long your resume is.
So interesting.
Yeah.
The advice I've always heard is try to keep it on one page.
Yeah,
but
no,
maybe that's for when you're sending it to somebody that isn't a machine. Right? Like,
well, even then, when I was recruiting, if I would get a resume and I could tell when they forced it on one page, and it would frustrate me to no end because I know there's stuff that's missing that might actually help them. But as it is, I have to put them aside as a maybe because I'm going to look at all the people who show me they have the experience I'm looking for,
Right.
and sort of check all the boxes. And then maybe if I don't find enough, I'll look at this one and give them another shot. So there's just no reason. I mean, over 2 pages, yeah, generally no.
Okay.
Like at that point, because resumes only have to go back 10 years, is I guess the other tip. So, but yeah, don't try and cram it on 1 page. You're not doing yourself any favors, because even I would say the recruiters generally don't care, because they're just going through and like checking quickly. They're quickly scanning first to make sure you actually fit the criteria, and then they're going to go back and read it. Hiring managers, yeah, maybe they care, but as long as the most relevant stuff is there, front and center for them, they may not read the second page, but we don't care. At that point, you've made it to the hiring manager.
This is so interesting, because this was a while ago, so I know things have changed, which is why I'm so excited to talk to you. Because when I was helping hire, it was easier for me to only take people on who submitted 1-page resumes, because I had to print everything out and organize and staple and get it to the right people. And so for me, it was way more work when people had multiple page resumes. And so I personally enjoyed when somebody had a 1-pager, because I could print it, I could organize it easy and all that stuff. I didn't have to staple it or make sure that the second page didn't get lost in somebody else's resume. And so it's just crazy. Like, you never know what the internal process is for a company, but I would imagine a lot of things are done digitally now and not printing physically and all that stuff. But who knows? I don't know.
But I also think, to your point, like, again, let's go back to knowing your audience. Like, you were working for a studio. In that world, like, 1-pagers make sense. It's very common for you to just see like the list of what they've been in, or the list like that. People are more trained for 1 page in that industry. If you're
hiring people, kind of that position was hiring for a lot of people straight out of college or grad school.
Oh yeah.
And so their work experience doesn't need 2 pages, right? Usually.
Yeah, no, so I totally agree. And so I think that goes back to, like, everything's very individualized. Know who you're sending it to, know the industry, know all of that. So that makes sense to me that in your role, 1 page would have been the most appropriate.
That's so interesting. Yeah, because it also makes sense. Like, look, if somebody's applying for a job where, like, they need to see that you have 10 to 15 years of experience doing that thing, you need to be able to show all that experience and not cut things off that are important by trying to stick it on 1 page.
Right. And they need to see the progression, right? They need to see that you had progressively more experience and more like leadership and more responsibility and all of that.
Wow.
So yeah, don't diminish what you've done in that way.
Let's talk about making a resume colorful. Should people do it? Should people not? Does it help you stand out? Okay.
Go crazy.
As long as the copy that's written on it is making sense for the role. And then if they happen to come across it, your pink or purple or blue might stand out.
First of all, like, no pictures.
Okay. I see a lot of pictures when I would look through stuff. There's a lot of photos. What's going on there? I would love your advice on that.
No, do not open yourself up to that discrimination, because we know people might say they're not, but we all know we have bias. Just don't open yourself up to that on either side, as a recruiter or as an applicant. Think about the computer reads from left to right. So we need everything to just be in straight line. There's a lot of like resumes templates you can buy and customize, and they have these columns and they look really cool, but they're not going to get read properly. So it's going to get jumbled up in the system. And so just be leery of those. That can be your fun resume. That can be your 1-pager. Like, with that, make an infographic. I don't care, because that's going straight to a person. So do whatever you want. But that's where, like, colors don't matter, but not all of the systems can read text boxes. So don't use those, because you don't know. Eventually these things will catch up. Technology will catch up. But keep in mind, these companies have paid a ton of money for this, their applicant tracking system. So they're not going to pay, for a while. So eventually they will get better. But right now we have to speak to the lowest common denominator. So we have to assume that they read left or right. We have to assume they can't read text boxes, but they don't have, you can find plenty of examples of resumes online that are ATS friendly.
Okay.
And it's okay to download and just pop your info in there.
That is so good, because I think a lot of people get excited to like get something cute on Canva and put their stuff on it, but it's like all those design things might not be reading in the system very well. So like you mentioned, so can somebody just Google like ATS friendly resume template and find what they're looking for?
Totally.
Perfect. Like,
actually, even in Word, I believe all of the templates, resume templates in Word are ATS friendly.
Oh, great.
I haven't looked lately, but last time I did, they were fine.
Oh, that's
and so
perfect.
yeah, add color. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
I mean that doesn't affect anything.
Right.
So that's where your personality can come out. The fonts, just make sure it's easily readable, like easy on the eyes. You definitely want that.
Yeah, styling it a little bit, just so a little pop of color, just so you stand out if they are, either printing them or seeing them on, sifting through. I think that's nice. Like you tried a little extra.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not just like, because I've also been the person that is just like going through a sea of black and white resumes and they're fucking crammed with stuff, and it's like I do not want to read all of this. And so like kind of the minimalist look with like a pop of color is so kind to my eyes when I'm looking at 300 applicants, so it's like, what's the happy medium? It works for the system, and you also get to stand out and individuate your resume.
Absolutely. And the other thing I think of too, because I know I've been there too, is since now I've given you all permission to go to 2 pages with your resume, put a little space in there. Like, let it breathe. Right? It is not a newspaper article. Just a space between your sections. Do what you got to do. But don't. Absolutely. And think about it before you even read it. Like, how does it look? Does it offend your eyes, or does it feel okay? So
would you want to read it if you had to read 50 to 100 of them? Right? And it's like, how do you make sure the most important stuff is being seen? What's the difference between a resume and a CV? Because you had mentioned the CV.
Great question. So a CV is generally would only be used for academic roles or research, very heavily like scientific research type stuff. But the difference is a CV will generally have your they're ugly as hell. They're just like, just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. But they have your like publications, presentations, any of that. It could take up pages. Like CVs can be pages and pages and pages long because of those different things. So most of us, the majority of us, do not need a CV. And even if you look at like in the European countries, they call them CVs, but it's still just mostly a resume, except sometimes they still put the pictures and their religious preference. We won't go there. But theirs is still just what we would call a resume generally. But the difference here in the US is that it would have all of your academic accomplishments and such.
Oh, okay. What does CV stand for?
Curriculum vitae.
Oh,
I don't know what that means.
Latin?
I don't know. Okay. That's just what it stands for.
Fascinating. Okay, that's really good to know.
Latin? I don't know.
Yeah, sounds Latin. Let's move on to cover letter tips.
Cover letters, you won't always need to write one. I give you permission if it doesn't. Some of the systems don't even allow for one, in which case you're kind of off the hook. But follow-up is super duper important. But where cover letters are really useful is if you are pivoting at all. You use the cover letter to help connect the dots between what you did and what you're going to do. So definitely write a cover letter. So when you can, or if they say cover letters encouraged, always write a cover letter in those situations. If they're opening themselves up to one, you write one. And I know that's making a lot of people groan right now because nobody likes it. But for the most part, cover letters can be fairly straightforward. Like it's an opening that says where what position you applied to, basic qualification. Then it's a few bullets that speak directly to the bullets on their posting. Again, connect the dots.
Right.
The way I approach it is we want to take as much thinking out of it for them as possible. We want to make it as easy as possible for them to move you forward. And so then it's the opening paragraph, the bullets, and then a close. And that's it for most things. But I will say, one of my clients, she was applying to a local marketing communications company. So she wrote her cover letter in the form of a press release. And it was so fun.
Clever. Oh my God,
so appropriate because it not only shows her personality, but it showed a real skill that she would need to be using in this role.
Oh.
And she's been there for many years now.
Oh my God, I love that. I love that.
So it's okay. So it's like when you can, adapt, be creative, have fun. So yeah, be open to the idea.
That is so great. And I mean, isn't it fine just to have kind of like a template that you just get in there and personalize for the position? I mean, you don't have to start from scratch with every single cover letter, right? Like a lot of the points are probably going to be similar. You can just word them differently.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. If you are starting from scratch with every cover letter or having to spend too much time customizing your resume for each position, then you probably haven't honed your target enough.
Yeah.
And you've kept it too broad.
I've been there. Shelby, I've been there. Like I got 12 cover letters and 12 different resumes for 12 different industries.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I've been there.
Yeah, don't do that to yourself. We haven't even talked about the whole podcast in itself would be just how to preserve your mental well-being during the job search. It's so hard but so important because I think above all else, like energy matters in this situation. And so we need you in like, peak Delanie when you go to interviews and when you all of that. So
it can be so discouraging when you are applying and you're not getting any bites and you're not exactly sure why, right? Because I think, again, we have our self-worth in this society can be so tied up to how we make money, what we do, all that. And so people really take it as a rejection of self when they're not getting the interviews or this or that. What has helped me is really like not taking things so personally. Like, yes, there could be something that you could be doing, right? Like listening to a podcast episode like this with all the tips that you're sharing, Shelby, is so helpful. Like, okay, let me make sure my technical stuff is there. But a lot of it is also just not within our control. And there's not a whole lot we could do. The fact that there's, people forget to take down job openings that are no longer available. I've heard some companies keep up job listings all year round, even when they're not hiring. So they have a consistent pipeline of candidates coming through. There's so many things that have nothing to do with your qualifications or ability and stuff like that. And just being kind to yourself about it.
Right. When you say you just stop taking it as personally, which I think is amazing. How did you get there? How did you stop taking it so personally?
I started Googling what the hell's happening, right? Like what is going on to where I feel like these things that I've applied for, I'm qualified for. And then you start learning about what's going on with the economy and the job market. And so even just Googling like, hey, this is what's going on. There might look like there's 100% of these jobs available, but actually only 30% of them are available and they're not being seen, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because they're just not even there anymore. Like,
it really
bad about you.
I promise if you're doing all the things you're supposed to do, you're going to get the interviews you're supposed to have. I swear. Remember, I've been doing this for years. So I've seen it. Like I have all this data. I think it's important in that situation too, though, that you sort of disassociate. You take a step back and you say, okay, so where in the process is it breaking down? Am I not getting interviews? Well, then maybe I need to tweak my resume. Maybe I need to rethink who I'm applying to or what I'm applying to. Like what needs to happen there? Am I only getting first interviews and no callbacks? Well, maybe I need to get some interview practice in. Maybe I'm not doing my research ahead of time. Like be really honest with yourself and with the process, but look at it as objectively as you can. And you might have to do that because, like a traditional job search takes months. So you might have to do that, sort of take a step back multiple times and be like, okay, well, now I'm getting to the second interview, but I'm not getting the final, the final round. Maybe it's my presentation that is falling short, or maybe, it's that I'm not doing well when I meet with the executive. So how can I improve my executive presence? So there's all these kinds of things, and you can improve all those things. There's people out there to help you. There's friends, there's coaches that will help you with all of that, right? But you have to be honest with yourself first and figure out sort of where it's breaking down.
Definitely. That's such a great point. Thank you for saying that it takes months, because I think that's another thing is like the people, if they're not getting some kind of hits right away, they're, they're going inward of like, what does this mean about me? And then the longer it does go on where it's still not happening, that kind of like job search kind of depression spiral can kick in of like, I'm never going to find a job that I like this, and like that can really be so detrimental to somebody's mental health. And we're just here to say, You're not a loser. You are qualified for something out there, and there are people that can help you find those things and make sure that you're working around all these like loopholes and stuff that you don't even know about.
Right.
How can you shift up your approach and angle when something's not working? Just pivot.
Exactly. And when you start to get in that spiral, when you get all up in your head, like you start losing creativity,
Yeah.
right? So where you would normally be like, oh, I should go to that meetup because those are people that are adjacent to what I want to be doing. Or, maybe I will go to this dinner party tonight to meet people because they all work and they may know somebody.
Yeah.
Like you start losing sort of just that openness and that creativity. I think the most important part of a job search is having the belief that you can get a job. When I think of people who struggle and take, languish in that search indefinitely versus those who actually get something, it's a matter of like belief in themselves. A lot of it.
So good. And that's why it's so important. Like, hey, if you need to just get something for the time being, because finding the job that you might really want could take many months or a year or more or whatever it is that you're going for. It's okay to just take whatever job that you can get and let that be a tool that can help fuel you and, where you can be more creative outside of that job. I mean, I remember I was, when I was doing stand-up and I realized like, I got to get out of this industry. This is not good for my mental health. I took a job in a call center that was not for me. Right. But it provided me with the stability that I needed to dream again of what's next. And so now I didn't have to worry about where my next paycheck is coming from. What's this, right? It was a 9 to 5, which after having been like, a performer who was traveling and making money that way, felt like I was giving up, felt like a failure, felt like, oh my God, I got to go back to a conventional job. I'm going to be freaking miserable. It ended up being one of the best jobs I've had, one of the best decisions I've made. Not only was it actually not too bad of a job, but it allowed me that structure of that's where I started my podcast. That's where I built my first business, Dicks by Delanie. That's where things finally took off because I just said I need some stability right now. It doesn't mean I'm giving up on finding a job that I love, but this is what's needed. And it doesn't mean anything about me that I went from being on TV to working in a call center, right? Like
actually what it means is you were giving yourself what you needed, which was the opportunity to take a deep breath. That's all it was. It didn't have to be, some sort of diminishing of your character. It wasn't like it had nothing to do with that. It's just you needed that time to regroup, and it's really impressive that you recognized that and that you took that.
I wish I recognized it in the moment and was nicer to myself, but now I can look back like, oh my God, thank God I wasn't like too big for my britches or whatever. And I was like, no, thank you. I will just keep burning myself to the ground.
And you are, you're sharing it out now. So you're helping other people with that story. I have a related about my 17-year-old son. So he got his first job and he's a bag person at a grocery store, right? One of the big ones here in town. And he's super introverted. And so it took a while, even just to get him to apply, then to get him to go in and meet with somebody. Anyway, eventually he got there. He got the job. He hates it. He's out of the house and not at his computer. So of course he's going to hate it, right? But he was really just, I would get a few texts of just misery. Like, how can I get out of this 8-hour shift they want me to take? And I'd be like, oh, you can't. Unless you have something actually planned, I'm not giving you an out.
Right.
And then one day he writes me something to the effect of like, I hate it here. And I'm like, first of all, this is not a text conversation, but here we are. So, because clearly I'm old and this is something that 17-year-olds do over text. Okay. I basically said, I don't care where you work. The agreement was that you would get a job. I don't care where. So do your best. Like, go get another job.
Yeah.
However, in the meantime, I want you to be incredibly grateful for this job because it's because of them you will get your next job because now you have work experience. They took a chance on you. You had nothing to show,
Right.
except for 3 years in marching band, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's all you got to offer.
Well,
Yeah.
you can play the cymbals, but can you bag these apples, baby?
Exactly. In the meantime, just be super grateful because you have all we ask of you is gas money. This job gives you that and more. So he took it and he actually did a little bit of searching and he realized, like, as far as jobs that 17-year-olds can get,
Right.
this is not that bad.
Right. Right.
So he doesn't love it, but he knows it serves a purpose. It's not going to be your dream job. I don't even know if a dream job honestly exists,
Oh my
right?
God. My dream job is not to have one.
Like,
It's
I
to not need
don't
a
think
job.
anyone could love what they do more than I love what I do, but I'd give it up tomorrow if I could spend the day on the beach all the time, right?
Exactly.
So,
That's exactly how I feel. I'm like, having fun in my free time is always going to win over a job that I love, and I love it. So, I mean, come on. I think this whole dream job situation is probably just, a capitalist idea trying to fuck with us. But
absolutely. And because to your earlier point, like, a job is just like one part of us. It's not all of us. We shouldn't put that much value in it because then that's when we get all messed up when we're looking for the next job. We place too much importance on what it's going to be.
1,000%. And I think it's so great where it's like, and whether it's your first job or you're pivoting to a different industry, that might feel like a tough time. It might be a tough pivot where you're kind of starting over in a way where you do have a bunch of experience, but you kind of maybe have to start at an entry level because you don't have experience in that particular company or industry. And it might feel kind of hard. It might feel uncomfortable. And I think we got to remove this idea of having like our job as a status symbol. I got to tell you something. I worked at Trader Joe's for a few years. And some of the happiest people I've ever met work at Trader Joe's.
Right.
They are loving life. And they, I worked there in college, and a lot of people were much older than me and had left careers that they hated or whatever. And they came to work so grateful and so happy. And I'm like, wow, they're onto something. I mean, a lot of these people don't even want the office job with the parking spot, you know what I mean? It's like, you really got to figure out what makes sense for you and what actually you enjoy. And if people treat you badly because of where you work, fuck them.
They are not your people. Can we just agree? Yeah, they are not your people.
Right.
Yeah, I love it. I love that you work at Trader Joe's. I can see that.
Yes. Are you finding everything okay, Shelby? What are you making for dinner
What
tonight?
are you doing this weekend? Yeah. I love it. It is so important, and I completely agree with you that we cannot place all of our value in what we do, because if for no other reason, then we don't always have 100% control.
Yeah, I don't care what you do. It's like, what kind of person are you? You could imagine why I didn't do well at networking parties in the entertainment industry, because I don't fucking care how many followers you have. I don't care what movie you were just in. I saw you being a dick to the wait staff, and now I think you're an asshole. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm not going to kiss your ass because you're famous or you're this or that. Like, I couldn't care less. And that's how I feel about people's jobs too. What kind of person are you? I don't care that you drive a Porsche. This is another thing about trying not to take things so personally. I interviewed for I once interviewed for a job, and I had 7 interviews over the course of 2 months for a consulting position. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I think I'm gonna get this job. And then they went out of business. They closed their doors. So it's like, you never know what's going on behind the scenes. And
you really don't.
Yeah, and it was a bigger company, so it was public. But if I had not seen it, I would have just thought, what happened? Why didn't they hire me? So that might be happening too, and they're not there's no posts about it, but maybe they went under. Who knows?
Oh my gosh! Or the people didn't agree ultimately on what they wanted for that role, so you're caught up in the middle of that. Or they decided they had to put a hold on it because nobody's hiring right now. Or you're right. You just don't know what's going on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's what you mentioned about the cover letter and using the language that speaks to the role and stuff. It's so funny because with postings that I've had in my own business, they've been very casual, not super like formal things. And so when people would write a message, it was like, oh, by the way, I can do video editing for X, Y, and Z. And I appreciated that because I wasn't using language like Adobe Premiere and this and that, like all the, you know what I mean? All the programs. I'm like, if you had said, oh, I'm great with Adobe and this and that, I wouldn't have known what the fuck you're talking about. But when the people that were like, I can do video editing for XYZ, I'm like, I know what that means. It could even be the opposite, where it's like, you might be very well versed in like some language that the person you're applying to isn't, and you have to kind of meet them where they're at. Might be helpful. But okay,
you're totally right in that you can often read the tone of the company in the posting. Those are the best postings, right? When you're like, oh, I think I can feel these people. I think I get it.
Yes.
So I like that you did your postings that way because people knew up front what they were dealing with.
Right, exactly. It's like the casual friend vibe, right?
Yeah. If you're gonna need like to be in a corporate setting, this ain't your gig.
Right.
So move along.
Swearing. I mean, I'm swearing in the job post, so I'm telling you who I am right away.
That's usually how I figure out if clients are right for me or not. It's like, how early in the relationship can I say the word fuck? Because that pretty much will determine the success moving forward.
Exactly. No joke. That's why I have swearing woven into my website, because if I get into a conversation, I get excited, the word shit might come out, right? And it's not that I'm trying to say it or not say it, but that's just how I speak. So I got to tell people like, hey, listen, this might happen. So as long as you know, it's on my website. All right. Like if we have a conversation and I swear, hopefully you're not offended because I told you. I try to tell you ahead of time.
Sitting right next to one of my favorite t-shirts, which says, good moms say bad words.
Oh my God. That's funny. That's so cute. I do want to touch on, you've applied for the job. Now what? We kind of talked about the sending a message, right? The interview, maybe.
Let's be really clear. So yeah, you've applied for the job, you've done the follow-up that you and I talked about.
Yeah.
And you get the interview.
Yes.
First of all, congratulations.
Yes.
Most likely the first call is going to be just a phone screen. It's going to be somebody from HR or somebody, and this again, I'm speaking in generality. Anything could happen, but most likely it's going to be a phone screen. And that's going to be a basic, like, do they really know what they're talking about? Great, move you forward. Regardless, even though that's short and not as critical, I need you to do as much research as possible before that. I need you to know like the company values. I need you to know like where you would fit. I need you to start speaking their language if you can. Equally, and maybe even more important, I need you to have yourself sorted. I need you to know what your overall messaging is. Like, who are you? Who do you want to be in each interview? What are you trying to get across? What are your strengths? I actually have a tool that's kind of like a flow chart kind of thing that I teach people to use. So there's like the executive message at the top, which is the overarching who I am.
Yeah.
And then there's all of the things that sort of got you there. Like it's because I've, I have really strong communication skills. I have all these qualifications. I have whatever. And then you need to then break that down into all of your actual accomplishments. Like, how did you do it? So you say you're good at communication. Tell me how you did that. And so those are, what we call PAR stories or STAR stories or whatever. It's, remember the A and the R are the same. So it's problem, action, result, or situation, task, action, result. So it's the action result that is always really important. And I want people to practice structuring their answers in this way for a couple of reasons. It minimizes the likelihood of them overusing the word we, because I don't care what all of y'all did. I want to know what you did. So I need you to say I. So the situation was I saw this particular inefficiency, and so what I did was, that's the action. So what I did was, so then it also keeps you on track. It gives you a structure so that you don't ramble. It keeps you very targeted. Like I'm going to give them the problem, or the situation. I'm going to tell them what I did about it, and I'm going to end on a positive. So
love that. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Even just the we to I is such a great tip.
And it's really hard because most of us, and I will gender stereotype here, especially women, we have a hard time talking about what we did.
Yeah.
It makes us feel like we're assholes or something if we're boasting. Right. Oh my gosh, in an interview you need to boast. Like, this is your time. Right? Yes. If you really did the work, tell them you did the work and let them know what your role was. Like, I identified a problem, so I put together a team and we, brainstormed, came up with a solution. I then executed in this way, and as a result, we saved the company $1 bajillion, right?
Yeah.
You always want to end on that result, on the positive.
I love it so much. I also, I think it's great, like researching the company and
Yes.
coming up with some juicy questions, maybe about the company or for the person that you are speaking to, if you know who you're going to interview, right? It's like, I like feeling like I'm also interviewing them to see if I'm going to fit with them. It's not
Because
just
it's not a
pick
feeling,
me,
Delaney.
right?
That is what it is.
Right.
You darn well better be vetting them too, because it's
Right,
not
it's like,
one-sided.
It's not just like, I hope you like me and pick me. It's like, I gotta like you too. I gotta like what you're doing and how you approach things. And of course, we're talking about when you have time to really pick your job and be patient. I know not everybody's in that position, but let's say that you have your whatever job that you're doing for the meantime to pay the bills, and you're actively interviewing and trying to get the thing that you want.
The only thing I would say is make sure you're asking the right question of the right person. So I want you to ask all those questions, but there's some questions that are suited for HR and some that are, you say, for the hiring manager, some you say for the peer interviews. And if they don't have peer interviews lined up, I highly recommend you request to meet with some of the peers, because they're going to give you just that extra little bit of like, is what this leader says the culture is actually what the culture is.
Ooh, I love that. Okay, Shelby, can you talk a little bit more about like asking the right questions to the right people? Maybe just like give an example. Let's say that somebody is meeting with the HR person versus the president of the company or whatever.
Right. So HR, you can ask things like, why is this position open? Because that tells a lot. Usually you can read between the lines on those, and they're like, well, the person left abruptly or whatever. Red flag, noted, right? But what you want to hear them say is, oh, it's a new role because we've been expanding, or the person was promoted. Like, those are great things. You want to hear that kind of thing.
Love it.
HR, you can also ask, like, what are the hours, or some of the more tactical stuff. The hiring manager, you want to ask things like, what's your leadership philosophy? Like, what's, along with what is it you need most from this role? Because you need to hear that too. You need to know up front if their priorities match with what you want to do, right? Is that what you really thought you'd get out of the role? That kind of thing. And then, when you're meeting with anything above the hiring manager, say, you're meeting with the CEO. Again, generalization.
Sure.
They'll do most of the talking.
Yeah. So true.
Let's be honest, right? But they would probably just ask straightforward questions about like your last role or whatever experience you have that they think is relevant to them, or why you want to work at the company. They'll ask you things like that. So you can ask them things like, what are you most proud of about this organization? Again, we're trying to see if the stories match.
Yeah.
So you can have some measure of that. So if you ask about the culture to the hiring manager, then you ask about, what the leader sees for the organization moving forward. Like, we want to hear some consistencies in those things.
Right.
Because, we can try and screen for culture fit, but it's really, until you're there, you really don't know. So the best we can do is ask it in a bunch of different ways of a bunch of different people and see what comes out of it.
Tell me if this is good or creepy.
Okay.
So
love it. I hope it's creepy.
Let's say I know who's going to interview me, and I do some research on that person, and on their LinkedIn or whatever I find, I can see like what other roles they've had or other companies they've worked for and all that. And part of maybe what I ask in an interview of like, what are some of the goals for the company as a whole this quarter or this year, or this department specifically, but also I saw that you've done this and this. What is your goal within the organization, or like for your own career, and how have you felt like this has been a good fit for you, kind of a thing? Is it creepy that I've done research about the person and I'm bringing it into the interview, or do you appreciate it?
I would say you were negligent if you didn't do the research on the people.
Interesting.
Because if you can bring it into the interview, be like, hey, I noticed we both graduated from the same undergrad. Instant connection. Or I see that your background, you also pivoted from healthcare to whatever.
Right.
I'm out of words, apparently. And if you see any sort of, so no, I think that you absolutely have to research the people. And that will, to your point, that can inform the questions you ask them. Right. So especially when you see, like, what was that transition like when you or what was the biggest challenge when you got here? I see, you were in a small startup before and now you're working for a major tech firm. Like, what was that transition like?
Okay,
Yeah.
good. That's good to know because
And
that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, not creepy enough. Work harder, Delanie. My final thought is interviews should be like conversations. Like they should, if it feels super antagonistic, and we know there are certain very large, well-known companies that have an official role in the interview process where their goal is to shake the person up.
Yes. I experienced that not too long ago. That was so weird.
And it is weird. And that's not, I don't know why they do that exactly. I still am not on board with it. And I know people that have been trained in it, and I adore them, and I still can't agree with it. But the best interviews are the ones where it's talking, where they're more like this, because you're going to get, like I'm speaking to you like HR professionals and leaders now. You're going to get more out of the person if you make them comfortable, and as opposed to those super stiff, rigid. I want to see how they react when I'm trying to make them feel like shit, right?
Yes.
Like that just makes no sense to me.
What the okay, so I experienced something like this. The company that I interviewed for that was over 2 months, that was like 7 interviews. That ended up going bankrupt, right? And then a lot of stuff about the leadership came out online publicly about how abusive and stuff the leadership was. So I was meeting with one of the leaders, right? As my final interview, and this is what was going on. I would ask a question, and it happened several times, but I'd ask a question and they would say, why are you asking me that? Right? Not in a nice way, or like, oh, why are you curious about that? Right? And then I would tell them, well, I want to know that the principles that are listed on here are actually reflected in your system. So what do you do in this situation? Right? I would tell them why I'm asking, because I want to know the fucking answer. That's why I'm asking.
Right. Yeah. Why do you think I'm asking?
But I don't know if they're trying to shake you up because they get so many like canned responses where people are just asking questions that are like, these are the questions you're supposed to ask in an interview, or they're trying to intimidate you and from the get-go to see, will this person comply as an employee, or are they going to be a problem? Are they going to speak up if they see something they don't like?
Or they just come from that super old school, like managers are managers, you are nothing but a peon. So
so anyway, I was like, wow, I've never experienced that. It did not feel good. And that was that the company went under before I got a job offer, but that actually did it for me. I'm like, if I get an offer from this company, I'm not going to take it, because if that's the leadership, I'm not interested. Everybody else that I interviewed with, lovely, conversational, all of that. But I'm like, this feels bad in the pit of my stomach. I can't exactly pinpoint it, but I'm not going to do that. And then everything came out about how toxic the culture was because of the leadership. So anyway, trust your gut too, right?
Trust your gut. That's huge.
If you can decline an offer because of something that didn't feel right.
I believe that our gut response is generally based on experience. Yeah. So it's not like a woo woo, I'm feeling this way. It's because like you've been here before, you've witnessed it before, right? You've taken it in somehow. So yes, trust your gut, because there's a reason. At least stop and question it. Like, where is it? Why do I feel this way?
Yes. Anything else that you want to share about interview and kind of post-interview, what kind of message to send as a thank you, how often to check in, like that.
Okay.
Kind of stuff.
Well, here's the thing. So I love my millennials, but I'm going to tell you guys, you got to write frickin' thank you notes.
Yes.
During an interview. Because I've had more than one say to me, that's really a thing. My God, yes, that's a thing.
Yeah.
Please. Especially if the rest of your, the rest of the people your age who are interviewing this role aren't doing it, then yes, that's a thing. But here's the other reason to write a thank you note. If there's something that you feel like you didn't explain well in the interview, or that you wanted, or you maybe left and you did a little more research on, or whatever, put it in the note. Like, they'll love that. They'll be like, oh, this person's actually invested in thinking about this.
Yes.
So, and it doesn't have to be handwritten. I don't care. Send them an email, please. But do personalize it wherever you can. But it can be short. Don't make it too long. But do it always, always without fail. Send some sort of thank you. And then a good question to ask, and it could be the hiring manager, it could be HR, is like, what are next steps, or what is your expected timeline for filling this role? Because then that will dictate to you how often you follow up.
Yeah.
And then, if they're like, well, we have people to interview over the next 2 weeks. At the end of the 2 weeks, you can just send a note that says, I'm starting to make appointments for next week. Let me know if you need me to leave anything open or whatever. Just to sound like I'm here for you. If you actually went through the interview process, like, they owe you we've moved on at the very least. Yeah.
Oh, that's so great. And like, yeah, it takes less than 5 minutes to send a nice little thank you email, maybe some personalization about something fun that you chatted about in the interview. And
exactly.
Like, it's so easy. And I've actually been in a situation where I was in a situation to hire somebody. They were both incredible, both overqualified, for the position. And we went with the person that sent the thank you notes and the follow-ups and the cover letter and all that, right? Yeah. So it's like they both crushed it, but this person went the extra mile. They messaged us when they applied. They sent a thank you. They also sent a cover letter that we encouraged to send, but wasn't, required. And so, like, we're going to go with this person because that's the only thing we can kind of base this off of.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? I mean, whatever you can do to distinguish yourself, because there's a ton of qualified people out there, really amazing qualified people. So you just got to do something to distinguish yourself. I was interviewing for an executive assistant role once, and executive assistants are amazingly efficient, like, intelligent people. Like, they put up with a lot. And this one in particular, like, it was taking a long time because this executive, to be honest, was a pain in the ass. And I almost didn't want to put anybody in the role. But anyway, she, after a period of time, she actually sent an article that she found that reflected back to something that, we had talked about in the interview. And I was able to just send it on to the executive and say, like, I just got this from her. She's still my top candidate. And it was just that extra little step. And we finally got her in. She stayed there forever.
Let's say somebody's tuning in right now. They're taking all these notes for, their job search and interviews and all of that. Anything that you want to leave with them with?
Like, preserve your mental health during the process. So whatever it takes to keep you strong. If you're a runner, then I, tell people that's formally part of your job search process. Then you must continue running. If you're creative, like, keep writing, keep drawing, keep doing whatever, like, that is part of your process, because you are not allowed to be at the computer for 8 hours every day. That's not how job searches are won.
I love that, because I also kind of got into that space where, like, I was feeling bad about a job search and I was almost punishing myself that I wasn't getting things and I wasn't taking good care of myself. And it's like, that's when you need to take the best care of yourself, and whatever you can do to kind of keep your spirits high and all of that.
And I know it's a luxury sometimes, but if you have to, step away from the search. You're not your dream job will not disappear in 2 weeks.
Right.
Nothing's moving that fast anymore. In fact, you don't even have to be the first person to apply anymore. So, because it's all going into a common database, right? Recruiters don't look for who's first unless they're, like, really desperate and checking them daily, but that just doesn't happen that often. So just take care of yourself as much as you can. Take care of yourself during the process, because that's what's going to keep things moving forward. That's what's going to keep you objective about the whole thing. And because here's the other reason that we didn't talk about. The reason we need you at full strength is so that when those job offers do come in, you can actually look at them from a place of wholeness. You can look at them and not say, I should take this because it's here. You can look at it and say, does this really fulfill all the things I had explored in the very beginning? Does this align with my values? Will this get me to the next step? Will this, can I make some meaning out of this? And so you just want to make sure it checks those boxes. And if you're in a bad place, then you're like, fuck it, I just got to take it. It's here.
Right.
And we don't want to be in that place, because that's when we make decisions, when we compromise on the culture and we compromise on those things that actually damage us, right, and set us back.
Amazing. Shelby, where can people find you, your work, all that good stuff?
So the website is Your Key Forward. I actually do have a real short, I think it's like 15 minutes. There's a digital course on maintaining your well-being through the job search, and it has a workbook that goes with it. And but it also gives a lot of structure. So I'm not just talking, telling you to meditate every day. There's actual, a lot of what we covered here today is in there, but in a very sort of, formal way that you can keep referencing back. Yeah, and if anybody needs me, my first session is always a discovery call, which is free. So don't hesitate. Yeah, and that contact information is on the website.
Yay, Shelby, I can't wait to have you back for another episode at some point where we talk about asking for promotions or pivoting or going from full-time to part-time or contractor.
Love it.
What happens when you're there in the job and now you want to make some kind of change, whether it's growth in that company or outside of it, or that. I think that's going to be a very much needed discussion too. So
can we start with that conversation with, okay, now you got the job, what are you going to do with it?
Yes,
let's start there and then move into, now you've had the job for a year. How do you get to the next level? Yeah,
exactly. Really how to thrive.
That.
Yeah, how to thrive once you're in there. So thank you for your time today. Super appreciate it. Always. And I'll be talking to you soon.
Thank you.
Oh boy, so many tips in this episode. This is one you may need to come back to a few times for reference because it really is jam-packed. Please share this with anyone in your life who could really use this information. It sucks to think that a lot of people are out there feeling really shitty about the whole job search process, not realizing that a simple tweak here or there could make a really big difference for them. Before we wrap up, I actually looked up the meaning of curriculum vitae. Shit, now I can't remember how she said it. Anyway, it's Latin and it means course of life. And then résumé is French for summary. So there you go. I still learn something new with this podcast every day. Unreal. And such a good reminder that you are not your job. There's so much beyond our control when it comes to finding work. Shit happens. I mean, pandemic, layoffs, ending relationships, relocation. So you are you no matter what, and your worth is not wrapped up in how you make money. All right, wrapping up with the Apple Podcast review of the episode. Oh my gosh, this one was so fun and this made me laugh. This is from Love Riley, and it says, love you. Okay, I don't have a lot to say, but I love this podcast. It makes me laugh when I'm down, and it's just fun when you're bored, you're laying in bed, and you have nothing to do. I just turn on the podcast and listen to these three funny girls, and I love you guys. Sorry, this is really long, but even my daughter and my sister listen to you guys. I just wanted to say you're really good, and this is a really good podcast. I don't know if you guys are going to be seeing this, but to everybody else that wanted to know the reviews or anything about the podcast, I would make it 101 if you could go over 100. So I'd rather you guys subscribe to this one than anybody else. Riley, thank you so much. This was really fun to read. I really appreciate you taking the time. If you want to leave a review that gets read on the next episode, you can do so on your Apple Podcast app. And in exchange for you taking the time to leave a review, I like to take some time on the podcast to thank you personally for it. Okay, everybody, I will talk to you soon. Thank you for tuning in to the Self-Helpless podcast. You can find our Patreon community, merch, and other goodies at selfhelplesspodcast.com. We'd be thrilled if you left an iTunes review, shared this episode with a friend, or post about it on Instagram and tag @Self-Helpless Podcast so we can repost you and say hi. Thanks, everyone.